Hello, welcome to Arise with Christ. I'm Carolee Bailey.
And I'm Angeli Plojak. We share stories and truths related to the temple. Together with you, our hope is to fortify faith in Jesus Christ and experience joy in covenant keeping. Referring to Lehi and Sariah's family, the 2024 Come Follow Me manual reads, "The Book of Mormon begins with an account of a real family experiencing real struggles. It happened in 600 BC, but there are things about this account that might seem familiar to families today. This family was living in a world of wickedness, but the Lord promised them that if they would follow Him, He would lead them to safety. There is power in this imperfect family's examples of faith."
That's such a powerful quote from the manual. And Angeli, in this episode, we get to learn about another family that showed great faith. They experienced hardships and trials, yet continued to keep their covenants, relying on the Lord for strength to reach really ambitious goals.
Yes, it's a fantastic interview, and I'm so excited for our listeners to hear it, Carolee. John Wadsworth is our guest for this episode. He shares his experience of losing both of his parents when he was a child and how he and his siblings cared for one another. We enjoyed getting to know him and learning his story. His son-in-law, Daniel Ranson, was a previous guest on Arise with Christ. Listeners, you can hear Daniel in episode 12. And we often hear, Carolee, that Daniel's story and testimony are really impactful. So we really encourage people to go and listen to that episode.
Yes, and I really appreciated learning about John's perspective of some of those experiences that Daniel shared with us. And for you listeners, whatever your circumstances are in your family, whether you're in a tough trial or you're in a season of plenty, we know that you'll be able to draw lessons from the experiences of the Wadsworth family that will help you in your journey to follow Jesus Christ.
John J. Wadsworth was born and raised in Panaca, Nevada, a small farming community 82 miles west of Ceder City, Utah. He is the ninth of 11 children. After serving a full-time mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the California Anaheim Mission, he continued his schooling on an athletic scholarship at Rick's College. It is here where he met his eternal companion, Patricia Mecham Wadsworth. They were sealed in the Salt Lake City Temple on August 10th, 1979. They then continued their education at BYU. They are grateful for a wonderful life they have together, serving the church in countless callings, including serving together as mission leaders in the Nevada-Las Vegas Mission. They are the parents of 11 beautiful children, and at last count, the grandparents of 54 grandchildren.
Thank you so much, John, for having us in your home today.
Very happy you've come. Grateful for the opportunity.
We wanted to ask you a little bit about your experience of being mission leaders in the Las Vegas Mission. Will you tell us that experience about receiving your call and what that was like?
So it was a very busy time in our life. 3 of our children were married at the time, and so we had 8 children at home still. And that's a busy time because high school and everything. It was in November, before Thanksgiving, that we received a call from Elder Nelson's office and asked if we could meet with him the next day at 11 o'clock. So we drive up to the church headquarters. We start walking into the underground tunnels of the church office building, and in the hallway was President Packer. We were walking hand in hand, dressed as good as we could be and with our hair combed and our teeth brushed. And President Packer sees us there and he says, "Do you know why you're here?" And we said, "No, we just know that we're meeting with Elder Nelson." And he says, "Well, I know why you're here, so you better get going."
Wow.
And so we go up to the office, and the offices were built 200 years ago, and they're very small. And so the 2 of us can sit on one side of the desk, and Elder Nelson's on the other side of the desk. And towards the end of the interview, he says, "Yeah, I think you guys are perfect." And we still don't know what we're doing. Towards the end, he says, "Well, we're here to call you to preside over a mission, but I'm not going to call you. In fact, it needs to be approved if you receive the call, so you may not get the call." And so we just have these preliminary interviews, and the calls are usually issued sometime before April conference so that we know who's going to be where. And we says, okay. And at the time, his son was serving as a mission president, so he gave us some experiences that his son was having. And so after the interview, we went home. And we're not to tell anybody, even our children. We're coming into the holidays now, and it was in December. And we had a family trip scheduled for New York. And so our oldest child with her husband and her children stayed, and the rest of us were in New York, and that's when the call came in the mail. And so we asked our daughter to read it over the phone, and she read that we were called to serve in the Nevada-Las Vegas mission, which is my hometown. So I was raised in Panaca, which is in that mission.
Okay.
So we were called home to serve. But in my patriarchal blessing, it says that I will serve at home. It actually uses those words in my patriarchal blessing. So we went to Panaca to serve our mission, and we were young and green behind the ears, and we had 2 businesses at the time, and we pulled up stakes. We took 6 children with us. One daughter went on a mission. She decided to go on a mission after we were called, and the other daughter started her schooling. Sarah started her schooling in Rexburg. And so we served the best we could. And the mission was quite large. It was about 1,000 miles from end to end. So we would go south into California and south into Arizona and north into just the southern part of Idaho. So I was on the road quite a bit. We left those 2 businesses because we were called. In fact, after the interview with Brother Nelson, President Hinckley calls me on the phone and said, "Your name has come up to serve as mission president." And I said, "Yeah, we had a visit with Elder Nelson." He says, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I go, "I don't know." I mean,
What do you say to that?
We're being called. So yeah, we're going to do it. He says, "Okay." Because he knows what happens to some of those that go out and serve. We were in the prime of our life. There's a really sweet time in your life when the children are home and when your businesses are doing well. That's a really sweet time of life. And that's where we were. So we went out and served, did the best we could, and we came back, and both those businesses were shambles.
Oh.
We lost everything. We had a lot when we left, but we lost everything while we were there. But we still have one another, and we still have our children, which are just remarkable. And we still have covenants that we've made with the Lord, and that's the most important thing. The most important thing in life is your children and the relationship you have with the Lord. And so we still have that. And we still have life, and we're still happy, grateful. And since then, we've been home for 15 years, which is a long time. I've tried my best to rebuild, but every time I try to rebuild, it doesn't quite work out. So I've sort of stopped trying that. And we're just focused on our family. And I'm a father and a grandfather now. The Lord's taking care of us. So it's okay. Everything's okay. We're here to return. We're here to gain faith and to live by faith and to return safely. That's why we're here. We're not here to build monuments or structures. It's to return home.
Thank you for that focus on your family and covenant keeping, and what you value most is what will last. Those relationships and those things that you are building within your family. You have built a beautiful family for sure.
Well, we're grateful. The Lord's blessed us. Actually, my wife is really her specialty is raising children. And she's done a marvelous job.
That is an admirable specialty for sure. You mentioned President Hinckley and your conversation with him. I think it might be interesting for our listeners to know your connection to him. If you wouldn't mind also referring a little bit to your grandfather and what you knew of him and remember about him.
Bryant S. Hinckley is the grandfather you're speaking of. And he came to Panaca a couple of times when I was alive. And I know that because there's a picture with me and him and a few other kids. And Bryant S. Hinckley was a remarkable man. In those days, back in the early part of the church, the 1930s and 40s, he wrote the whole lesson material for the church. He did it all the Sunday school lesson material he wrote. And so he was a great author. He was an educator. He was the president of the BYU Academy, I think it was called. So he first married a Christine Johnson, and together they had 9 children. And she died suddenly, leaving him with 9 children. Now, I got to back up a little bit because I'm sorry. So he was raised in Cove Fort. His father, Ira Nathaniel Hinckley, he was a great pioneer of the church, and the prophet would use him to go back and forth. Brigham Young sent a rider up to Colesville, Utah, up in northern Utah. He sent a message to Brother Ira. And the message, he opened it up and he says that Brigham Young wanted him to go down and build Cove Fort. And so Ira says, yes, I'll do it. So he left his family, went down and built Cove Fort with his brother. And then they brought their family down. So my grandfather's brother, he was down there being kids with his brother. And they were playing a game with a loaded pistol, and his brother shot my grandpa. So that fort was built to protect the saints from the Indians as they passed from Salt Lake to St. George. But my grandfather was the only person ever shot.
So Bryant was shot by his brother?
By his brother.
Okay.
So my grandfather died with that ball still in his leg.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so then he was an educator, and he married Christine Johnson, and they had 9 children. And then she died and left him with 9 children. And I don't know the history exactly, but he must have farmed those kids out. He was the president of the BYU Academy in Salt Lake. And there was an English teacher there named Ada Bittner. And she was single, and they fell in love, and they married. And they had another family. Now, the first family that he had, I didn't ever really know them. I met a couple of them, but I was so young that I don't remember. And so Ada Bittner and Bryant Hinckley, they had this family of 5 children. The first is Gordon Hinckley. And then the last one is Sylvia Hinckley, which is my mother. Bryant S. Hinckley was called to preside over a mission in Illinois. And so my mother went there, and they lived in Chicago. Gordon was born in 1910. My mother was born in 1920, so they were 10 years apart. So when Gordon was called on a mission, he was called on a mission right after his mother, Ada Bittner, died of cancer. She died of cancer at, I think, age 49. So Elder Hinckley goes on this mission and is serving best he can, but he's feeling like he's not doing very well. So he writes home and says, I'm wasting my time and your money. You remember that? He would tell that story quite a bit. And his father would write back and say, just forget yourself and go to work. But you can sort of feel some of the emotion there, because my mother was 10 years old when her mother died. And there was other children there that he could probably assist in helping. He was the oldest of the family. And so that's just some color commentary that I would add to that. But her whole family was just marvelous. I remember when President Hinckley was you'll read this in his biography, when he was a young apostle, probably just over a year, he was sent out to the island of Moapiti to dedicate a chapel. This is in Tahiti. He was young, and it was a very tender time in his life because he dedicated the chapel. But when they were preparing to dedicate the chapel, there was this group of islanders that were coming from another island in a boat, and they got caught in a storm, and they all drowned. And so he stayed there to serve those families who lost their loved ones. And I traveled there years after. So he's the prophet now. And I was sitting on the steps of that very chapel in Moapiti. And I called him. And he picked up the phone. And I says, President Hinckley, I'm sitting on the steps of the chapel you dedicated in Moapiti. He couldn't say a word. He didn't say a word. We finally just hung up. So that was probably 30 plus years after that experience he had.
I love hearing about your relationship with him and that connection that you had to President Hinckley, because he's dear to so many of us and did so much to teach us the gospel and to teach us about our covenants and what they mean, and to provide the opportunity for so many more members of the church to receive them. I mean, we think of President Nelson as the temple building prophet now, and I think President Hinckley was kind of the first one that got that ball rolling rapidly. We all love President Hinckley, so it's so fun to hear your personal connection to him.
Well, I don't know that I was really close to him because he was so busy, but we lived in Panaca, 80 miles west of Ceder City. Panaca is a small town, and when we would go shopping or to the doctor or wherever we needed to go, we would go to Ceder City.
That was the big city?
Yeah, it was the big city. And so my mother, she suffered with cancer for 8 years or so. And when it was close to her last days, she was taken to Ceder City Hospital. And she was there for a few days. And while she was there, President Hinckley came in on I don't remember what day, but he was able to fly in to see her. But then the flight wouldn't get him back in time for his meeting, so he would have my brother driving back. So he arranged to have my brother driving back. So he came to Ceder City and gave her a priesthood blessing. And in that blessing, he released her from this life. And then my brother, Scott, tells this story, and James was with him. They drove Elder Hinckley back to Salt Lake. While they were driving back, which is about 3 hours, President Hinckley was very concerned about those little kids that were going to be motherless.
One of them being you.
It means me and my younger ones and some of my older siblings. I think there was probably 6 siblings left at home when she died. And he was nervous about those, and they would be looking at the scenery, and he would tell them a story, and then he would pound. You remember President Hinckley sort of pounding the pulpit. He would pound the dashboard and say, "Follow the prophet. Follow the prophet. If you'll follow the prophet, everything will be okay." That was the charge for those children, whoever the prophet is.
Well, let's go back and paint the picture leading up to that point. You've referred to growing up in Panaca and your family there, and you're one of 11 siblings, and you have 2 parents. And then tell us the story of what happened with your parents.
Well, I had a great childhood, I think. I think children have selective memories. I see this in our own children, that they remember really the good things. They don't remember the bad things. And so I remember a childhood that was filled with adventure and intrigue and wonderful. We had a farm. It was not a large farm, but about 1,000 acres. And we cultivated probably 200 or 300 acres of that. And then we had cattle that we would run on some government land. And so that's the way I was raised, and it was a beautiful childhood. But I never remember my mother well. She was always sick. She would get up and cook and do what mothers do, right? She would write talks and do the homework for the kids. And she would do that, but often she would be tired. She never really was well that I remember. But a young boy can never imagine that his mother could die. No matter how sick she could be, the young mind can't understand that. So everybody knew that she was going to die, but the children, it was sort of a shock for us. So she suffered with cancer, same disease as her mother. She died the same age as her mother. She had her last child while she was still, after she was diagnosed. And so that left these children. So there was 3 married at the time and 6 grandchildren at the time. And my father, he's a cowboy. He would use cowboy language too. My mother, I always get after him a little bit for using cowboy language. I don't use cowboy language. My wife won't let me do that. But he worked on the farm and sold insurance, and then he fell ill suddenly with a stroke. So 16 months after my mother died, our father died. And that was a shock because he was healthy, and then he was put in the hospital for a month or so with a stroke and died. And so we were orphaned.
And you were how old?
I was 13. So I was just coming into my teenage years, and life was wide open to me. And my little brother was 7. My father didn't baptize him. He was sick when he turned 8. And so my brother baptized him after our father died. So President Hinckley and actually President Kimball came and spoke at my mother's funeral. And then President Hinckley came back to speak at our father's funeral. After Dad's funeral, the talk was, what should we do with these kids? There was Sherm. Sherm was Gordon's brother. He was willing to take a few kids. I think Ruth was probably willing to take a couple of kids, which would be great for us because we would then be refined and, and be better people. But after that night, that very night of Dad's funeral, we sat around the dinner table, which could fit all 11 children. And the discussion was, what should we do with these kids? We decided, I wasn't part of the discussion. I was just there listening, of course. It was the adults that were doing the discussing. They decided that they would leave the children together. There was 2 married couples in Panaca. A sister, Terry, with her husband, Laurel, and a brother, Scott, with his wife, Marcia, that lived in town. And so we decided that the children could stay in the home and the siblings could watch over them. But there was 3 goals that were set around that table. And those 3 goals were that every child would receive a formal education, university education. Every son would serve a mission. And there were 3 sons left. And every child would marry in the temple. And so those were the 3 goals. And then the family left, and we were there in that home. And we would fix our breakfast and fix our lunch and fix our dinner.
How old was the oldest child in the home?
So the oldest child in the home would be either a junior or senior in high school. And then when that junior or senior graduated, they would go to the university, and the next one would take over. So we still had pigs to feed and chickens to feed and eggs to gather and those kind of things. But the girls would cook the meals. And okay, so hamburger helper was the menu most nights, tuna helper often. So when I married my wife, I says, please, never again. Hamburger helper, never again. Tuna helper, never.
I can imagine.
Never had that. But I had a wonderful childhood. Seriously, great childhood. In the summer, the married kids that were going to school or something, they would come home, and so they would whip us back into shape. And then when the school year started, we would go back to do our thing. But we all survived, and David, our youngest, was married on their anniversary, August 20th, and we were all there in the temple. So we completed those goals. The church was interested in it for some reason, and they posted it on the front page of what was called the church news back then. So when Mother and I got married, we had 3 goals. It wasn't to travel the world, although we have. It wasn't to make a lot of money. It was 1, that our children would be educated, that our sons would serve missions, and 3, that they would marry in the temple. And so we've followed that same routine, same mold, same formula to educate our children and to have the sons go on missions and to have them marry in the temple. And we've been so blessed.
It is so impressive to me, going back just a little bit to that table you were around after both of your parents had passed away. And as a family, you counseled together and made these amazing, lofty goals. What prepared you to be so strong and solid and wanting to make those goals? I'm curious about that as a family who has just gone through a lot of trauma, yet you still had this eternal perspective and this, you were thinking celestial, as President Nelson calls it at that time. What do you think attributed to that?
Well, I suppose it was teachings of our mother. So Rachel of old died giving birth to Benjamin. Joseph was 8 years old then, I think. Joseph learned from his mother everything that he needed to know. Keep him straight. And I suppose it was a lot the same. As a child, when your mother's on the other side, even though you could never believe that that would ever happen, when she's on the other side, you don't want to disappoint her. So I don't know, but I think that she was able to instill into us, and our father too. Our father was a great historian, and he read the scriptures regularly and always in front of us and bore testimony. And Mother was just this soft-spoken person that would teach. So she was really ill, as I said, when I was young. Our stake was in the Enterprise stake. So Enterprise was about 45 minutes from Panaca. And during a stake conference, it was back then a 2-day event, Saturday and Sunday. It's a stake conference, and Mother's sick, so she's staying home on a Sunday. I was able to stay home with her. I was so excited because I could fly a kite. I could do whatever I wanted to on Sunday, right? My brother was with me, and when it came time, she was in this chair. She couldn't really move from the chair. She taught us a lesson. I don't remember those stake conferences, really. But I remember the lesson that she gave. It was short, but it was, when you're asked to go 1 mile, go 2. And so I remember those lessons of her mother. I might just add another story, because after she died and Dad was still alive, he was invited to go to a Beneficial Life convention in Mexico City. And he took my brother, Tony and me. He took us too. So we were in Mexico City. Mexico City is a huge city. Panaca, it's just a dust town. Mexico City had skyscrapers, and we were in this high-rise hotel. So my brother and I were riding the elevator, pushing all the buttons.
Of course you were. That's what brothers do.
Suddenly the door opened, and there's President and Sister Kimball.
Oh, no.
My brother and I drop our head. We slink back to the wall. And of course, President Kimball, he knows us because he just was at our mother's funeral. And so he's very friendly, and he gives each of us 10 pesos. And then he had to stop at every floor, of course, because we had pushed the buttons. So we had some time together, and then he left. So anyway, it's not only that the teachings of our parents that guided us through that, but also angels from heaven, for sure. The veil is really quite thin, and you realize that when you go through something like that. Sorry to be emotional, but I'm old. Mm-hmm. I remember President Hinckley would never cry, but he got older. And when we went on our mission, this was after his wife died, we went to his office to be set apart, and he cried through the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So it's okay.
It's okay.
So.
Well, and I know that you experienced those challenges as a child, and your posterity has had some challenges and some opportunities to feel that thinness of the veil, I guess you could say. I'm interested in how you feel your experience from your childhood has helped you as a father when you've had children who have lost children of their own. What's that experience been like, and how has your experience informed your fathering of them?
Sarah's daughter, Sarah and Daniel's daughter, became ill when she was 20 months old. And they rushed her to the hospital, and we were praying so hard. But we went up and saw her. She was sick. We laid our hands on her head and gave her a blessing. We gave her a blessing that she would live. Next morning, she passed, and the loneliest walk I've ever made was walking out of the hospital with a blanket draped over one arm and a bag in another. Not with Ella. So I don't know how to teach them, only that it takes faith. President Irene taught that very concept when they were nervous about their own children passing, and Brother Irene says it doesn't matter to his wife because we have the ordinances and the covenants, so it doesn't matter. And it's sort of been sweet, a bittersweet thing, because we know that Ella's on the other side, and she's feeding the Ranson family these names that need ordinances. So Sarah, in a very methodical and very disciplined way, sets a sealing session for our family once a year to remember Ella, and we seal all these people together. Their work have been done throughout the year. You ask how to teach them. I don't know exactly how to do that, except for allow the Spirit to teach. And Sarah's been such a great example through that, and so is Angela.
Well, I think you are great examples of teaching your family, and I love the idea of incorporating them into your family going forward. I know for Sarah and Daniel, anytime there's a family picture, there's Ella in the frame with one of the kids holding her picture. And I think that's just a beautiful legacy and a reminder that she is part of us.
Elder Suarez, in his conference talk, Covenant Confidence Through Jesus Christ, he talks about this a little bit. I loved thinking about this while you were talking. He said, "My dear friends, if there is one thing we could possess and one thing we could pass on to our children and grandchildren that would help each in the tests and trials ahead, it would be confidence in the covenants made through Jesus Christ. Obtaining such a divine possession will help them live as the Lord promised his faithful followers. My disciples shall stand in holy places and shall not be moved." And I just am so in awe. I'm so impressed with your efforts to teach your children that. And we all know that our children have agency. And our job is to teach them and nurture them in the gospel, and then they choose their own way. But it's so beautiful and inspiring that you're able to make those covenant connections with your family on a repeated basis.
Great example. I read that again this morning. So I read something and I write something every day. And I write something to my children every day.
Wow.
And I shared that quote with them. I noticed just a few weeks ago. I don't know if they read them, but I share it with them on the 15th and then the last day of the month. But every day there's something written.
Can I ask how you share it? I'm curious in that.
It's just, I'm sort of old school, and I get on the note app.
Okay.
And I type. But when we were on a mission, we would have a calendar, and the calendar would give you that much that you could write, right? So you couldn't write too much. And so we would write, and then we started giving those to our children. And so they would write each day just a little sentence. It sort of came from President Eyring's idea of being grateful every day.
Yeah.
And so I used to travel a lot. When I traveled, I would send travel notes. So every day I would send this very lengthy note. It was normally history or something of our family. But I'm not traveling. I haven't traveled for several years now. And so now I write something every day in that little note app. And then I email it to me. And then I put it in an email to them.
Okay.
And I share it with them twice a month.
That's an impactful habit.
Yeah. And I've done it for years now. And normally I will read something that's striking. And that was really striking to me, that it's the greatest thing you could give to your children. I shared that, but then I would write, hey, we went to a game and saw Carter play, and he's amazing, right? Something like that. I try to name somebody in it so that they'll be interested.
I love it. It's a history.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I do it on the phone because I can
that.
do it anywhere. So while I'm watching a soccer game, I can do it.
See, you say you're old school, but that's actually really
Okay. I think there's
pretty good.
apps that do that for you now. And
there's different things. I like the Notes app too, actually.
The email part is the old school part.
Yeah. So I email, and they won't let me add pictures because it takes too much memory.
Too much.
Well, that's amazing. What a legacy and a gift to your family that is and will continue to be. And just as you spoke about Bryant, I can imagine Carter or Caleb in the future talking about you with so much love.
I hope so. So we have now 55 grandchildren and feel so blessed. When you get married, you imagine a few things that might happen as you start your family together. Beyond imagination is what we've lived. And your imaginations are pretty good. But we've lived a life that's way beyond what we could ever imagine. And it's because of heaven.
Well, this has been a beautiful treat for us. I just feel like we have soaked in your light and wisdom and beautiful experiences. And the sincerity with which you share them is really a treat for us to behold. How would you encourage someone to arise with Christ?
Well, to do that, you need to have Christ a part of your life. And it has to be a daily thing. And the thing about the church today, which is so remarkable to me, is that there are resources now that are so plentiful, so great, so amazing that we didn't have, that are available today. And our youth have challenges for sure that we didn't have back then, that they have today. But the resource not only matches the challenge, but is overwhelming to the challenge. And you can make Christ a part of your life daily. Just if you visit what the church has available for anyone and everyone. And through prayer, through study, and through bearing testimony. And one of the great things that we're grateful for in our prayers every day is that our children have testimonies of Christ. It's a gift. Testimony is a gift. And you have to live for that gift. But to have a testimony of Christ and the prophet, priesthood, temples and covenants is just such an amazing thing. And our children have that. And we're grateful for that because it's not always the case. It's a daily effort, sometimes even an hourly effort, but at least a daily effort. Not sure what the right answer is, but that's my answer.
We're so glad you joined us today. Arise with Christ is all about connecting with others and growing in faith. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who could benefit from it. Your support really means the world to us. Follow us on Instagram at arise.with.christ for inspiration and community.